Welcome back, crewmates. Today we're talking about the Kaido leader deck that you've seen on our feature matches. We're going to be going over the blue-purple deck list that I've updated since those feature matches. So we hope you enjoy what we have to offer you today. We're going to start talking about the leader first, who with a Dawn under him. He gets to take a Dawn into active from your Dawn deck once per turn when a opponent's creature is KO'd. So playing this deck, we've noticed that you get a lot of ramp off of this. It's very consistent. You probably get 4 to 5 extra Dawn per game just off of the leader by itself.
Yeah.
And playing blue with the purple is actually coming very handy because I actually use a lot of the blue 1-drops that purple just doesn't have. I don't even think purple has a 1-drop creature yet. So it's very useful in the early game for having the blue. So the 4 life is definitely worth it in the long run if you just want to use the blue cards with your purple cards. We'll move into the 1-drops. So first off, we're going to go ahead and start with 4 Perona. Perona is a very good 1-drop. It lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and rearrange them in any order you want. So it's a pretty good consistency card if you want to have a certain card in the next few turns, and it might be on the bottom of those 5. You can get it earlier so you can use it. And that clutch 1-drop is very important in a purple deck where you don't have any 1-drops at all. Moving on to the next 1-drop. We're playing 4 of the Blocker Law. I like having 1-drop blockers, and purple does not have one. Purple only has 2 drop blockers as their lowest count. So once again, being able to splash blue into the deck, let me use a 1-drop blocker. And the deck has enough draw power which you can get into these blockers efficiently and be able to wall up so you don't just die with your 4 life. The blockers are definitely useful when you're doing that. That's it for the 1-drops. We don't have any 2-drops in this list. Go straight to the 3-drops. Playing 4 Jack. Jack is kind of like a utility card. I don't always go for him. He's not like the main purpose of the deck. But he's a good like B plan, because when Jack attacks, you can minus yourself the Dawn and your opponent has to discard a card from your hand, so you can control the card ratios, the card advantage of your opponent has, and you can really control them on being able to guard certain things. In my testing, this deck in particular doesn't rely on him, and frankly I don't summon him that much. But if you don't have your main game plan, he's a good secondary game plan. The deck seems to be consistent enough to get its main game plan off pretty well though. So Jack's definitely good. He has guard, so if you're not using him, you can still guard with him. Moving on, I have 2 copies of Sasaki. He's a new addition to the deck. I wasn't playing him previously in the videos. I'm really just playing him not for the ramp, but more because he has 2k guard. So he's kind of like a flex slot right now. I'm not sure what I would play instead of him at the moment. So I'm still, evolving the deck. As any good deck list, it's always getting better. Cards coming in and out. But right now, he's pretty good as just extra guard in your hand. Moving on, we have another blue card. I play 3 copies of Doflamingo as an additional blocker. He also lets you check the top 5 cards of your deck. So he's just like Perona, lets you get some added consistency that you might otherwise not have in your pure purple deck. And having an extra blocker is always nice. And 3 is not a lot cost-wise, so he's good to put out on the board at the end of your turn when you want an extra defender. Moving on, I'm playing 4 copies of the man Who's Who. So Who's Who is our trigger creature. So if he's triggered from taking a damage, you can play him for free. And he has a very useful ability that on play, you minus yourself a Dawn, and you get to KO any opponent's character that costs 3 or less. And it doesn't matter if they're active, it doesn't matter if it's rested. Just a very flexible card. My only issue with Who's Who is that he has no guard. If he had guard, this card would be, I think, absolutely perfect all around. But they had to balance it somehow, so no guard is acceptable for the utility that he brings you. In the early game, he can kill attackers that are setting up. In the late game, he can kill low-to-the-ground blockers, like the 1-drop Law, the Choppers, the Capone. He can even kill killers, because he's a 2-drop, and like the Black Marias and stuff. He takes care of those very efficiently, so I like having him around. And the negative Dawn actually works really well with your leader, because if you give 1 Dawn to your Kaido leader, and then you play Who's Who, neg yourself a Dawn to pop a creature that triggers your Kaido leader, and you can immediately get that Dawn inactive, which is very nice. Going into 4-drops, we have another blue card that I think is really good, and that is Mr. Dracule Mihawk. Now, this is kind of like Jack, where I don't really play him a lot to the board, which is okay, because he has 2,000 guard in hand, so he's excellent in hand regardless. But what he is he's a contingency plan. See, his effect is if there's a Dawn under him and he swings, you get to draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. So if things aren't going your way in terms of how you're drawing in the current game, you get to play Mihawk and possibly draw into your engine. So having a contingency plan like Mihawk, and then if you don't need him as a backup, being able to guard with him for 2k, he's just an all-around good card in my opinion. And I think most decks that can play blue should play for Mihawk, regardless of what you're doing. We're up to the 5-drops. We're going to go ahead and start with a playset of Extra Drake. Now, Extra Drake, I'm going to put in the same category as Jack and Mihawk. So, I don't summon him very often. His effect is Dawn -1. Your opponent discards a card from their hand. Its effect is very good. It's a good effect. But I usually find myself spending my 5 Dawn on other things like blockers and my main attackers. But he also does have 2,000 guard. So he's excellent in hand if you don't play him. So all around, if you want a 5,000 attacker and you have nothing else going on, you can play him, get his effect off, which is good. Or, if you have your game plan already rolling, you can keep him in hand and he's a good block card. So there's really nothing wrong with just playing 4 Extra. Next up, I have my favorite blocker in the deck, which is 4 Queen. Now, Queen's really good. He's 5-dropped, he's 6k, so he's bigger than your leader, so he's easier to guard than your leader when you block things. And on play, you neg yourself a Dawn, and you get to draw 2 cards and then discard 1 card from your hand. So he is a big blocker that can give you hand advantage. I always just like playing Queen when I'm able to. He lets you sculpt your hand, he pluses your hand, and he's a big blocker, so he's easy to defend even when he blocks, so you can keep him around for multiple turns. Go ahead and wall up with Queen, and everything is okay. Next is the main part of the deck. This is what you're aiming to do. So we're going to start off with 3 copies of the 9-drop Kaido. So this is the main guy that you want to see probably at least 1 copy of in your opening hand, because this is what you're trying to aim toward. Now, if your deck is smoothly running, you should be able to get Kaido out on the board on your 4th turn, regardless of if you go 1st or 2nd. So what he does is he's 10k attack, and on play you neg yourself 5 Dawn, and you can KO any of your opponent's creatures that have a cost of 7 or less. And then he gains Rush, so you can swing that turn. And he works great with your leader Kaido, because you only need 9, so you can give 1 to your leader, pay 9 for this Kaido, then he'll pop something, and then your leader Kaido will ramp 1 to active, so you can stay 1 up. And then if you have, Onigashima up, you ramp 1 back. So the Dawn -5 is usually only a Dawn -3. And then since you're gaining 2 back at the beginning of your next turn, it's a very easy price to pay in this deck. You're never going to go very low on Dawn, so you'll always be able to play your cards on the following turn. And then playing these turn after turn, because it doesn't take very long to ramp back up to 10 if you have a 2nd copy, is pretty much just like lethal to most decks, because they're not handling multiple of these swinging every turn. The next big drop I play is 2 copies of the 10-drop Kaido, which is 12k base, and on play, Dawn -6, and he wipes the board. So he destroys all other creatures on the board besides himself. Now, I normally rather go into the 9-drop, because I don't like tapping out. But if they have a massive board, like 3, 4, 5 creatures, you can play this Kaido and just equalize the board really fast, and then try and just stabilize on that. You just got to make sure that you're not too low on life or too low in hand when you play this, because it's going to be harder to defend yourself, because you can't play any blockers the turn you play this. You can't use any counters on your opponent's turn because you'll be tapped out. But for the situations that this comes up, I think it's very worth having in the deck as a tool. And that is the last of the character cards. Moving on to the events. We have 4 copies of Bolo Breath, or Blast Breath. The reason I play 4 of this is because it's a 1-drop event that can give you 4K. And when you're playing the 9-drop Kaido, the most you can have up is 1. So you want this as your main event so that you can always play it. And you're not stuck with like a 2-cost event that you can't play on the turn you play your 9-drop. And if anything worse comes to worse, if they want to swing at your 9-drop Kaido to try and get over it with their leader or something, you have a way to make him 14, and then, you know, another guard card in hand, you can make him 15, 16,000 power. And that's probably not going to be able to get over, and I would 100% guard him if they tried to swing into him. And the Dawn -1 is very negligible in this deck, because you can ramp up so fast. That's why I like Bolo Breath at 4. I am playing 2 copies of Brachio Bomber. It's a very high-costed removal spell, so I'm only playing 2 copies of it. It does ramp 1, but it gets to KO any 6 or lower character. So I like to use this mostly for like big blockers. So it pops, you know, Queen. It pops Trafalgar Law. It even pops the 5-drop Crocodile blocker. Just kind of clear the way for your bigger guys so that they can't chump block like your 10 and your 12-drop Kaido. Like, I've even used this to blow up like a 1-drop blocker just to get it out of the way, because getting chump blocked with a 1-drop blocker on like a 12,000 attacker never feels good. But you definitely don't want to brick on this, so I only play 2 copies of it. I am playing 2 Love Lovely because I can play blue, and this is a really good card. So you pay 2, your leader or one of your characters gains 4K, and then if you have 3 or less cards in your hand when you play this card, you get to draw a card. So it replaces itself, it gives you a little card draw, and it can defend you, but with the cost of 2, it's actually a little awkward in this deck when you're playing such big guys every turn. So I'm just playing it at 2 right now, but it comes in handy. And the last card in our deck is 4 copies of the Onigashima. Now you definitely want to open this card every game. You 100% want to see it. And if you see multiple copies of it, it's okay, because that's Queen and Mihawk's job, is to get the dead cards out of your hand. So cards like extra copies of the 9-drop, extra copies of the 10-drop, and this Onigashima that don't have guard value, you can actually cycle them out of your hand pretty efficiently thanks to Queen and Mihawk. But you really want the 1 copy as soon as you can play it on your 2nd turn, so that by turn 4 you have max mana and max Dawn, and you can go ahead and play your 9-drop, or even the 10-drop if you needed to. And then after you play the 9 or 10-drop, this really helps you ramp back your Dawn count so that you're not too far behind after you play those big drops. So that'll go ahead and do it for the updated Kaido deck profile. I hope you enjoyed this. I really wanted to try and do a real-life deck profile, you know, the old traditional way to do it, because I had these decks printed out and everything. And I wanted to bring you something different than the desktop recording screen that we've been seeing around so often. So I hope you like this choice of ours, and we hope to bring you another one soon for the red-green Luffy deck that was also featured on the channel fighting this deck. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.